One of the joys of my life has always been fantasy fiction and science fiction. And so the making of utopias, how you would really like for the world to be, has been something that's configured, has been configured in my imagination, almost all of my life. The Wanderground was almost 90% channeled. And by that I mean it had come to me in short stories that I just suddenly wanted to write, and it was like automatic writing. This is certainly true up through the first half of the book, through the chapter called Diana and the Moon. After that, when I got into the matter of the gentles, it was not quite so much channeled as it was trying to be fitted into what I knew of what at that time was cultural feminism or lesbian separatism or whatever it was that you wanted to call that part of the new women's movement that talked about women taking the power into their own hands by going back to the land and finding their psychic powers, and somehow that wonderful feeling of if we all breathe together, inhale together, and then exhale together, we can just blow the patriarchy and capitalism away. We can just blow it away because we are women and we are magic and we believe in woman love and we're taking the environmental questions that we have seriously, and we're going to live the way that we really think women and the world ought to live. And that was what came to me in the Wanderground and what those first chapters were about. When I got to about the middle of the book and had to deal with the gentles, or the men, it became a little bit of a different matter, because the chapter called meeting the gentles, I kept wanting to make it my way, according to my lesbian separatism and according to my beliefs about what men ought to be, and it was a very conscious effort to write that chapter, and it never ever came until I was able to sort of ease up on the matter of my trying to put my interpretation on what I thought gay men, particularly gay men, but all men, good men, would do. And when I gave that up, the ending came, and the ending was simply, the jury is still out. That meeting took place in a courtroom, and the jury was still out. We don't know what the men are going to do, but we at least give them the chance or the possibility that they may have some of the powers or equal powers to women, and that they may be doing something equally important as to what women are doing, and in addition to what women are doing. So there was no conclusion that I really came to about the gentles. And then the rest of the book sort of flowed in the same fashion from that chapter and from almost a kind of a channeled place. I say it was channeled because there's not much that's changed. I don't think there's a single word in the Wanderground, even the Spinster's Ink version, that has been changed, except one part in Klana and the Snakes, one line, since it was first written down. So the Wanderground was itself, it got passed around on those purple dittoed sheets for years, and Xeroxed copies of the dittos, and then dittos of the Xerox. It was just being passed around at least all over the East Coast. And until Persephone said we ought to publish this. And so when we got it published, it had become then the full vision of what I felt was the women of the world's answer to how we should deal with violence, and that was it. When 10, 15 years later I began to think about what world I would really like to have, and more than that, how it might differ from, or how it might differ from the Wanderground, or how the Wanderground philosophy, ideas, virtues, values might play into that, I was going through some pretty heavy-duty stuff in my own psyche. And so the book that emerged from that, or the two books, the Concho and the Magister, or what was originally called Little Blue, came from a place that, did not have that mythic quality to it overall, but was very firmly placed, or I wanted it to be very firmly placed, in a world that was pretty practical. And the thing that I was going through in my own mind was the conflict between myself as a good materialist who just believes everything, a socialist. The communist the Mao Zedong in particular was very attractive to me, and I'd been doing my Marxism studies and so forth, and I really was pretty much a materialist and thought that, where do ideas come from? That whole questioning thing. It's really clear they come from the material reality. This is where we are. This is what I am. I want to be one of these people. And at the same time, I was still having dreams like from the Wanderground, So I was experiencing inside myself a real schizophrenia, which emerged in the book into Jezebel, who was the witch, and Zood, who was the magister, or one of the three most powerful women on the planet, who was the head of, or one of the three heads of the Concho Bu, of the very practical nature of what it means to have a police force that is worldwide, full of virtue about how to handle violence, and is all women. Okay? Mm-hmm. And that idea was then fired itself into the whole vision of Zood's world and the problems that she had facing the issues having to do with violence, and Jezebel's world, where there is still a whole subculture of women who don't believe much, who still believe that the police are nothing but a part of the old patriarchy, Mm-hmm. They don't want anything to do with rules and regulations. They're still very much in tune with the earth and with the ways in which women's bodies works and the way in which lesbians, relate to each other. It's a whole different world, and it was a world that was right smack down the middle in me that I was trying to resolve. And the truth of Little Blue, with its very practical materialist side and its very still Wanderground type side that was represented in Jezebel in opposition to Zood's world, that whole thing then became a book or a reality that I found, in which I found the answer, at least in myself, to what it is that I do believe, and how those two worlds can both be lived, and how Jezebel and Zood can indeed be lovers, and can indeed be coexistent in a world that in the Wanderground was not a presupposition at all.